The following is rated not safe for work. It contains strong language, adult situations, and lots of spoilers. Discretion is advised.
In the criminal justice system, cinematic-based offenses are considered especially heinous. The dedicated attorneys who investigate these villainous films are members of an elite squad known as the Reels of Justice. These are their stories.
Order, please, order. The Reels of Justice is now in session. Judge Big Ben Haslar presiding. We all rise for the Honorable Judge Haslar. Be seated. Welcome to the Reels of Justice. Today we are hearing the case of the people versus Star Trek Insurrection, a 1998 science fiction film about the crew of the USS Enterprise who uncover a Federation conspiracy to forcefully relocate the inhabitants of an isolated planet with peculiar properties. For those of you unfamiliar with our court proceedings, we are here to determine if this film is guilty of being a bad movie. As always in this courtroom, films are considered excellent until proven awful, and the burden of proof lies upon the prosecution to prove beyond the shadow of a reasonable doubt that this film is guilty. Mr. Joshua Weilerstein, you are appearing on behalf of the prosecution. You may present your opening statement.
Thank you. I should preface my arguments by saying that I am a huge Star Trek The Next Generation fan. It's a series I came to more as an adult, and as a kid I was absolutely obsessed, and probably still am, with Star Wars. But what I loved about watching The Next Generation was its almost relentless focus on ethics and on a kind of constant sense that humans can always do better and better, and that the moral quandaries that especially people like Captain Picard and Data run into are so fascinating, and even at times I think they approach something very profound. And I loved episodes like The Measure of a Man, which dealt with Data's sentience, and I, Hugh, which dealt with the individuality of a Borg. So when I started watching Star Trek Insurrection, I was pretty excited because I knew that generally, as you mentioned, the plot has to do with a kind of ethical question. Kind of questions that are at the heart of the best Star Trek episodes. But then I started watching this double episode that they called a movie, and all of my and all of my excitement quickly evaporated. What I ended up watching was a plot that's more like Star Trek meets The Curious Case of Benjamin Button, with overdone and terrible jokes, bad music, preposterous explanations for things happening, and character traits for the members of the Enterprise crew that they never displayed on the TV series. And the thing is, everybody knows Next Generation series had more than a few stinkers as episodes, but those were sort of fun to watch for how absurd things could get. But I felt like this movie was all of the Next Generation's bad episodes rolled into one movie. Humor that doesn't really land, overwrought and kind of moralistic dialogue, and those absurd explanations, like the fact that the Federation was relying on public polling to pull off the extremely unethical thing that they were trying to do. Star Trek was always political in a certain way, but I just imagined some Klingon walking up to someone's house on Earth and trying to take a poll, and I couldn't stop laughing. The Federation also behaves in a way that's completely anathema to anything they usually did in the series. And also, just on a practical level, the timelines are screwed up as well. The people on the planet who have been enjoying the youth-giving radiation or whatever started noticing these effects, if I remember right, after months or years of living there, but the Enterprise crew arrives and starts getting randy with each other after about 5 minutes. Felt like watching wish fulfillment fan fiction for some of the characters as well. Let's have Troy and Riker have a non-awkward, normal relationship. Let's have everyone be able to shoot giant phaser guns. Let's have Data make faces and sing songs. But the one thing they kept from the original show is that Worf is a joke at all times.
Take that, Worf.
Poor Worf.
In short, I think this movie as a concept had a ton of potential. It had all the makings of a great 2-part episode, but on almost every level, execution is bungled, resulting in an exasperating and frustrating movie, and the worst part, it just wasn't any fun.
Thank you, Mr. Weilerstein. Appearing on behalf of the defense is Mr. Gillen J. Schlender. Please present your opening statement.
Thank you, Your Honor. As my esteemed colleague said, Star Trek is very near and dear to me and millions of people around the globe. So dear, it is the hill I will die on. And as a matter of fact, I did die on this hill in my celebrated case, The People versus Star Trek Nemesis. Thankfully, Ryan Luis Rodriguez shot my corpse into a newborn planet, and I was resurrected by space magic. So today we're here to talk about the oft-maligned Star Trek Insurrection. In my case, I want to look at a few facets of this movie and isolate him, but also put it into the context of Star Trek as a whole. We'll focus a lot on intentionality in this courtroom, as that's often the measure of a successful movie. Now, my esteemed opponent will surely introduce all manner of quibbles, but they do not a bad movie make. For you see, that is the trouble with quibbles. So let us.
I knew you were doing it.
Yeah.
Don't make me hold you in contempt, sir.
We're doing this on Zoom, so most of my talking is with my hands now. It's completely throwing off my game.
Do we have a break?
So let us boldly go to where this podcast has not gone before, to seek out a new verdict for Star Trek. Not guilty.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Weilerstein, you may present your first exhibit. Kapla!
So I realized my opening statement was most of my exhibits, but I'll try to go back a little bit. Essentially, sorry, I will try not to sound like my bar mitzvah. Essentially, I felt like this is a movie that had a lot of potential. I love when Star Trek gets into these ethical questions of what is right, what is wrong, but it was so blindingly obvious who was right, who was wrong, who was the good guys, who were the bad guys here, that all of that ambiguity that the episodes I mentioned in the opening statement, like I, Borg or Measure of a Man, where you can see both sides of an issue and you can really feel like the characters are grappling with something. Here, the Enterprise crew arrives, they see something is wrong, and then they all just decide, okay, well, we're going to turn on the Federation and start firing guns at them. Like that's the progression in it. And I felt like all of the great ambiguity that makes Star Trek such a powerful show to so many people was just completely lost. So that's my
I want to object to one thing, if I can, real quick, Josh. So you say it's so obvious when they get there. Are you saying it's so obvious that Picard was doing the right thing, or that the Federation was doing the right thing?
Or the Sona.
Well, Sona and the Federation working together.
That Picard was doing the right thing.
See, I'm glad that you say that, because that is the moral strength of Picard, that we're right there with him the whole time. We know he's doing the right thing. But Admiral Dougherty, he talks about, it's just 600 people. Contemporary reviews, like from Roger Ebert, were saying, like, of course you would move 600 people so the metaphasic radiation can be used to heal billions. That is why it's such a compelling story, because the stakes are so small. You have to test your metal even when it's small and even when it can help billions of people as opposed to just 600. So I think what you're saying is a weakness is actually a strength.
So, but you just wrote a better movie than they did. So
that'd be a first.
Because
that is the movie that I just described.
No, but what you just described is what this movie should have been about. But instead, Picard just says, no, that's wrong. And then they start fighting because it's blindingly clear to everybody that this is the wrong thing to do. Also, they never really address, as far as I remember, why they can't just move these people for a minute and then figure out how to work with this radiation. There's so many logical holes to get to where they want to go. And they're talking about an ethical question of do you it's basically like the utilitarian question, right? Do you help a lot of people and hurt a few people? Like, how do you help the most people possible? But I feel like a show like The Good Place did a lot better at dealing with a question like that than this movie tries to do. So that would be my answer to that.
Well, I would say,
judge from the jury, could we have kind of an explanation of what this radiation does and what the bad guys want to do?
Actually, I can fill that
Mr.
in
Schlender,
real quick. So, and to address the point that Josh brought up, like, why don't they just move the people? So the rings around this planet are filled with what's called metaphysic radiation, and this radiation regenerates the cells of anyone who's around them, whether they're in the larger orbit of the planet or on the planet itself. The people who live on the planet are called the Baku. So the Baku are basically immortal. They've been living there for over 300 years with the benefit of this metaphasic radiation. The Sona, the quote unquote bad guys, depending on which side of this you're on, are wanting to harvest all of that concentrated metaphysic radiation from those rings and use it in applied sciences. However, this process that they say of destroying the rings will make the planet uninhabitable, and that's why they have to move the Baku off it. And they're not trying to kill the Baku. They want to move the Baku. This is what's so interesting about this movie, is that the Sona and the Federation aren't like it's not a complete black and white bad guy, good guy situation. There's a lot of gray here that they're exploring. And it's not until the end where the Sona leader gets so frustrated with the process and he just snaps. That's when he finally gets super evil. He's like, fine, if the Baku don't want to evacuate, then we'll kill them. So
and the Sona need
so.
They're gonna die within like the day or like week or something like that if they don't harvest.
They say the Sona will not have enough time to benefit from the normal process of the metaphysic radiation. So they can't just because Picard specifically says, why don't they set up a colony on the planet? And he's like, they won't get the benefit in time to save them. And one of the doctors who's working on the main bad guy, he's like, oh, you're too many toxins. We've reached the edge of genetic manipulation. So this metaphasic radiation science that they want to apply is the only way they can survive.
Mr. Weilerstein, did you want to speak to that point?
Yeah, I mean, it's all too perfect. It's all too, they arrive right at the last moment when they have to get there, and they have to do it now, and then the leader of the Sona is cartoonishly evil by the end of the movie, and he's pretty evil the whole
F. Murray
time.
Abraham? How dare you?
He won an Oscar.
Yeah. I mean,
won
come
an
on,
Oscar.
Salieri becomes
Salieri.
cartoonishly evil by the end of the movie. And, I mean, he does a great job as an actor, but his dialogue is just so over the top and ridiculous, and, randomly just killing the Admiral by stretching his face, like, there's just...
cool.
It was cool. I'll give credit to that. That was cool.
All right.
But look, like, it was just, everything worked out too perfectly, and the moral questions that you're bringing up are resolved by the characters so easily. They basically just say, no, this is wrong. And in the best episodes of Next Generation, you see Picard discussing with people. I remember in the I, Borg episode, Guinan comes in and she's the one who's been against having the Borg on the ship, and then she meets him, and then she's like, oh wow, that's a real person. And then they have this amazing discussion about whether this is the ethical thing to do, to destroy this entire race of people because of using this boy essentially in that story. But here Picard's just like, guys, this is wrong. And then all of the other crew show up, and all of a sudden they're all fantastic marksmen too, and just show up and start shooting. And
because the metaphysic radiation radiation makes them younger, sharper shots, better hearing. Worf is stronger. It's great.
Worf also just has a pimple the whole,
he's going through Klingon puberty.
That's embarrassing, sir.
It's
we don't want to drag Worf through the mud.
It's all too perfect, and it's all set up that the gray ethical stuff that you're talking about, which is, I think, what they were going for. I don't think they were going for the wrong thing, but in the execution of the movie, all of it just is smoothed out into this black and white. The Sona become more and more evil. The Federation is completely... I know they have weird times in the series, but the Federation is acting in a way that's completely different from how they normally act in the series. They act in this very kind of direct and blunt way. They use their, there's always another solution. There's always another solution, and this idea that the Sona have to be there right then. Like, why did they arrive just at that moment? There's too many logical holes to fill in this story the way they wanted to do it. And so it just becomes kind of this blunt instrument of this is how you should be ethical in the world. And that was my main objection to the movie.
I do appreciate what you're saying, but I just don't think it's as crystal clear as you're making it out to be. I think Picard does. The reason he doesn't struggle with it so much, I'd like to submit into evidence the episode Inner Light, where Picard lived the entire life of a scientist of an alien race that was completely wiped out, and he carries those memories of an entire people in him. It's why he could play the flute, and he has those memories. So
the flute. This is how you play a flute.
Well, that's how it's like.
That's how he does play. It's like a recorder thing. Yeah.
You're the music guy. You tell me.
Space flute. Order in my courtroom.
All right, so space flute. And so Picard actually has very intimate history of people being wiped out. That is part of his DNA now, and he does not want to see that happen to the Baku. So I think if we look at his history, his reaction, if anything, is very restrained.
Well, I think that I would have liked to see one reference to the Inner Light. I don't think that was part of the subtext of the movie. I think that's a nice idea, but I don't know if there's.
I don't think you could ignore it. Michael Piller was involved with the writing of the script. I'm going to be talking about him a lot in that episode. So he was this guy knew the show.
That's the greatest episode, I think, of all time.
Absolutely.
I was so moved by that episode. But that episode, the ethics of what they were trying to deal with, and I'm just remembering a moment in the Measure of a Man where Riker, he's forced to act as the prosecution, right? And he
Yes.
is so convincing in describing Data as not human, as not sentient, that Picard is almost convinced. And by the end, of course, and Picard has to deal with that there are actually two right sides to this. And that was what was so powerful about that episode. Not that at the end that they're all going to say Data is sentient, right? That's what the outcome is going to be. But there's the debate to get there is what's key. And in this movie, the Federation finally tells Picard what they're going to do, and Picard's like, nope, mm-mm. And then
he gets very disillusioned with the Federation and how they're acting. Now, this probably doesn't go back to those season 1 episodes where it's because the whole Federation leadership was actually bug aliens. They forgot that conveniently.
Exactly.
As did the rest of us.
Yes, exactly. So clearly now it's all humans now. So I think we're all set. And that's one of the interesting
How can
things
you know?
How can we? That's one of the interesting things about this movie, though, Josh, is that the Federation is not perfect. And like you're talking about how the plan lines up too perfectly in the timing. I don't think the timing is perfect, especially because they're going to die soon. They finally got the Federation to help them out. The only reason the Federation was going to help them out is because they were on the ropes from the last movie. The Borg basically wiped out the fleet. Unrelated to the movie canon, you can even just look at Deep Space Nine, the whole Dominion Wars going on. The Federation needs allies. It needs better science. And that's where the Sona are able to make this Hail Mary play. But I don't want to get too far.
Order in my court. I think we've hit the points of the plot, whether that works or it doesn't work. Did you have another exhibit to bring forward, Mr. Weilerstein?
Yes. One of the most fun things about watching Star Trek is sort of the awkward humor, right? There's things that are silly. There's these moments where Data tries to act like a human, and he starts, rambling off days and months and years, and then Picard always has to shut him up. And there's Data trying to become a human through music and through, when he tries to play Ebenezer Scrooge. It's one of the great moments in The Next Generation. And this movie tried so hard to be funny, and I just didn't laugh one time. Of course, the legendary moment is when Data starts singing Gilbert and Sullivan to sort of reset him or something, which is just so ridiculous. And also, again, there's a kind of attempt to make everything kind of a joke, and it's all a little silly, and all the characters have all these winky inside jokes to each other, which, by the way, for someone who had never seen a Star Trek movie before or a Star Trek episode, I guess they figured nobody's coming to this movie if they're not a Star Trek fan anyway, but you would have no clue what's going on, why people are acting that way. Data, for all anybody could know coming to this movie for the first time, is just a very, very pale human who's acting totally bizarre. And there's
I got to object though. This is a sequel. This does, even if you don't watch the show, you have the Generations and First Contact are before this. That's jumping into King of the Hill. No, not King of the Hill. The Lord of the Rings, Return of the King, and going, who the hell's this Frodo guy?
What's up with this ring?
Which is kind of what my dad did.
I don't think that movies have to follow exactly onto the shows that they're based on, but I think that characters should act somewhat consistently. And Data being reset through his singing of Gilbert and Sullivan, which is clearly just a device to make people laugh and say, "Oh, look how funny Data is." It just doesn't work, in my opinion.
I think it does. We'll let the jury decide, I guess, because I see what Picard was going for. He's like, hey, if I could touch something in his memory that might help him reset, because they didn't know exactly what was wrong with him, and it didn't actually work. It distracted him long enough to get the shuttle attached, and then he still almost killed him.
Yeah, that's
true. And it's funny. It is funny.
I don't think it's funny because
that was funny. You didn't laugh.
Are they good singers? Comment on that.
No, Brent Spiner is a Broadway professional. So
I mean, look,
the prosecution question is: Gilbert and Sullivan really easy to sight read?
I don't even know. That's a good question. I would say that none of my criticisms have anything to do with the acting, because I think they were all doing the best with what they had to deal with, which is often the case in that show. But I think that, my essential problem with the whole movie is that things are too convenient, too easy. They fit things too well. And, the humor just doesn't land. And there's things that just are happening that are so out of character to what you would understand from watching the series, that essentially the movie just doesn't work, because it doesn't work on its own, because it's kind of a silly movie with a very heavy-handed. There's one of my favorite lines from the great show Parks and Recreation, is a moment where Leslie Knope is taken to the human farm that is run by April Ludgate's friend Orrin, and it's all about how terrible humans are and how horrible everything is. And April says to Leslie, "What do you like about it?" And Leslie goes, "The heavy-handedness." And that's exactly how I felt about this movie. And you know, I have to always bring up the music part of this. So that seems to be my role here. I was very disappointed with the music, because I love Star Trek music generally. And in this case, it all felt kind of thrown together, and just nothing really made sense. And it was all kind of just a little bit mediocre. And that I think with that, I'll rest my case.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Weilerstein. But out of curiosity, is it the opening theme, like of the Baku Village, that you didn't like, or was it the whole score?
The opening theme was fine. My problem was actually more with the action stuff, which in the show is often really powerful, and in the movie it felt very cheap and kind of just effect based, and kind of just, oh, there's a shot, we're gonna make a big cymbal crash, and then we're just gonna have this sort of. It didn't enhance the movie at all, and that's for me what, you know, to me Star Wars isn't Star Wars without John Williams, and that's why I didn't like Rogue One very much, I think, because John Williams didn't write the music.
I know somebody who's gonna love you for saying that.
And nothing beats that to be continued moment with the music stings, with Picard being a Borg at the end of season 3, right?
Exactly. No, there's great music throughout Star Trek. I didn't think this movie had that.
Mr. Schlender, you may present your first exhibit.
Well, thank you, and very gracious to Josh for letting me interrupt him so much. So
how much more do you have left?
I'm coming right back at you.
Good. So I do want to talk about the tone of the movie, because that's kind of where Josh was leaving off on, and I do have quite a bit to say to that. In preparation for this case, I read a magnificent book called Fade In, the Writing and Making of Star Trek Insurrection by the guy who wrote the movie, Michael Pillar, who is no longer with us.
Double dipping, I see. He wrote the movie, and then he gets to write the book.
So exactly. And the book, actually, it was posthumously published. Paramount wouldn't let it publish it while he was alive, but it has since been published, and you can get it by going to michaelpillar.net.
Posthumously published by Paramount.
Not posthumously published by Paramount, but posthumously published. And get ready for a knockdown blow. And okay, so anywho, so Insurrection by design was aiming for a different tone than the other Star Trek movies, and a little bit from the show. So, and the biggest contrast, of course, would be the movie that directly came before it, First Contact, which we all know was more of a gritty, darker. Some even describe it as like a horror movie. I mean, it's pretty intense. Insurrection is not. It was funnier and a lighter movie. So we got to see Riker and Troy have their romance really blossom. You know, it was fun. He comes in there, it's like, I'm in need of some counseling, and she's sensually shaving him in the bathtub, which is just worth mentioning.
Oh, it's so gross.
Gross. Oh,
their whole relationship. Sorry to interrupt you.
This is how babies are made, sir.
You get shaved in a bathtub, and 9 months later.
Just
and then what?
The whole show is predicated on their constant will they, won't they, and then there's like this weird moment in later seasons of the show where Worf and Troy have this thing going on, and in this movie, I felt like the guy who wrote it was just like, you know what I really wish would have happened is that Riker and Troy, like they have a really great normal relationship, and I'm just gonna make it happen no matter what, and with no sort of acknowledgement of their history. That's my.
I think they acknowledge the history enough, and I think when you combine the metaphysic radiation, making everyone a little younger, a little spunkier, I think it all works together. And as you know, in the next movie, they go on to get married. They're married in Picard, you know, so it all ended up working out well. Don't watch the Picard series though; it's terrible. Another thing in this movie, Geordi got to witness a sunrise with his own eyes.
Big objection to that.
What are you objecting to that for? That's great.
No, I think it was beautiful, except that they forgot about an episode where Geordi gets his sight back and from Riker where Q gives Riker Q powers, right? And Riker
Yes,
takes
I'm
away the
familiar with the
visor,
episode.
and Geordi gets his vision back, and he says, "No, I don't want it like this." And again, I don't think Geordi would have been so moved by that sunset because the way he got his sight back was so unnatural.
I think he would have been moved simply because it was natural. Metaphysical radiation, that's the real thing that was happening there. Metaphasic. I keep saying metaphysic. Metaphasic radiation.
Well, it kind of
There's
is
no crystals
metaphysical,
involved.
right?
Yeah, no, but you are right. He does get his sight back in that one episode, but he doesn't see a sunrise or anything like that. And he even says to Picard at the time, he goes, it may not last, but I just wanted to see this. And Geordi leaves the area with Riker at the end too. So he, even with his sight, he doesn't go back down to the planet. He leaves. He knows he's going to lose his sight. He knows what this is going to cost him, and which I think makes the moment even all the more poignant. And Picard, he's actually, he's feeling younger, he's reflecting on his years of service and everything he's wanted to do in his life. He gets to spark up that little bit of a romance with the Baku woman, he gets to buckle some swash, you know what I mean? He just gets to be an action hero. He gets to have a lot of fun with it.
A quick objection to that too is
Sure.
There's a famous line that Patrick Stewart said about what he wanted Picard to be like when the show first started. And I don't think I can say it on this show because it involves
Yes, you can.
profanity.
Please,
Oh, I can
no,
say it?
please fucking do.
Didn't he say that he wanted Picard to be all about fighting and fucking? Like that's all he wanted. And I felt like they were just like, okay, Patrick, here, take whatever you want. You're going to fight everybody. You're going to have this relationship. And again, his yes, he thinks about his younger life, but the whole show is about his conflict between his duty and what he wants to do with all the random people he meets throughout space. And again, in this movie, it's all black and white. Like when he's with her, he's all in. And then by the end, he's just like, I gotta go, sorry. And it just, it's all, I think what the first few things you've mentioned are all true to a certain extent, but I think you're filling in the details that they didn't fill in the movie.
I respectfully object. I think everything I'm talking about is plain on the screen for you to see. I don't think I'm reading too much into this, except for the reading I did into the book. And so just a couple things about this movie too. That level of intimacy is stuff that we're talking about. It does kind of have a for the fans feel, but I would like to say that there were contemporary movie reviews like by Gene Siskel, who notoriously did not like Star Trek, and he said, I don't watch the show and I don't like the movies, but I really liked Insurrection. He liked the characters. He liked all that. And also this movie tested better with women than any other Star Trek movie before. And I'm going to guess since. I mean, I really doubt
because there's only one.
Well, I just don't think those reboot ones probably tested well,
I don't know. Chris Pine carries a lot.
Random light flares don't test.
Yeah, I imagine. And so the whole point of this movie is this is supposed to be to Star Trek The Next Generation what the voyage home was to the original series. This was the lighter, like, I don't want to say family oriented, but it's almost like a date movie kind of thing. Like this is one you can bring almost anyone into and they can enjoy because it's fun, So like First Contact is closer to Wrath of Khan. Insurrection is closer to the voyage home.
I think that as just one more objection, I think again everything you're saying has a real rings true, except that none of it works very well in my mind in the movie because the lighter stuff only makes sense if you know the past, and then you have to sort of say, okay, the past half corresponds to what is happening now, but they're also trying to do something new. It's hard. It's just hard to get into it when you know the series. And I would imagine, I mean, maybe I'm wrong, but it would be hard to get into it if you're coming into it for the first time.
And again, even if you don't watch the series, though, this is the third movie of a series too. So I can understand if you've never watched all the Next Generation, that's fine. But coming into this, having never seen First Contact or Generations, I don't think you have as much cover.
You would have to know something came before it anyway.
Yeah, exactly.
Did you have any final points, Mr. Schlender?
Honestly, I think I touched on a lot of the stuff that I wanted to. Just one of the things I just wanted to say too was like talking about like the stakes and execution of the mission. Why does Picard object? Why does the Federation make this deal? And I would say and kind of what we've talked about, whether or not it's a black or white problem. I just thinking like, there's easy to think, well, the Baku are being selfish, but they have a right to be there, right? And that's what it all comes down to. It's not Spock's message of the needs of the many outweigh the needs of the few, so while we're sitting back and watching it, we could think of all these flawless solutions to these problems, but in the reality of the movie, in the reality of our own world, flawed men and women make these decisions. Flawed men and women execute these plans, and that's where things get messy, So the fallibility of man, for really the first time in Star Trek, at least in like the Roddenberry vision of it, it's on display in a way that's really palatable, because you don't want to hate the Federation for what they're doing, but you understand why Picard is taking the stand he's doing. Like, you understand where everyone's coming from, and you understand that they're all imperfect people, and maybe the right decisions aren't being reached, but people are doing what they think is the right thing in the moment. And that's a beautiful message from Star Trek, and I'll rest my case on that.
Thank you, Mr. Schlender. Both sides have rested their cases. You may now present your closing arguments. Mr. Weilerstein, you may begin.
So I think that a lot of this comes down to whether or not you think the concept of this movie worked. Because I think the backstory of a people that's been living peacefully for 300 years and the possibility of billions of people getting to use the technology that's kept them alive is, again, quite powerful. Except that the way the movie is portrayed is through cartoonish villains that are full of rage and then suddenly turn back because of one little speech of Picard. You have wish fulfillment in characters' behaviors that are different from the series. You have humor and a supposedly lighter touch that ends up just sort of sounding a little hokey. And you know what? Star Trek is supposed to be hokey. Star Trek is supposed to be nerdy. That's what it is so wonderful about it in some ways, is how shameless it is about that. Except this movie, to me, felt self-conscious of its nerdiness. It felt like, okay, everybody knows we're nerdy. We're going to try to make this really funny and kind of modern and popular. And instead, it just came off even more hokey. One of the funnier memes of the show was that whenever Geordi had to explain anything, it was all this technical mumbo jumbo, and he would always say that he had LeVar Burton said, I had to memorize all this stuff. I had no idea what I was saying. And then I'd ask the writers, they'd say, oh, we have no idea either. And in the show, though, there was always, it seemed like there was a point to it. And in the movie, every time there was one of these weird technical explanations, it just sort of was like, hey, look at that miracle. Look how cool that is. And again, just all of the execution, from the music to the humor to the plot to the motivations of the characters, all felt very half-baked.
Thank you, Mr. Weilerstein. Mr. Schlender, please present your closing argument.
Thank you, Your Honor. I would like to take a moment in my closing to dedicate this episode to Michael Piller. Piller was a driving force for the Next Generation and then Voyager and Deep Space Nine. His book, as I mentioned, published after his death, Fade In, provides a wealth of information on this movie and his writing process. All Trekkies will miss him and his influence. That said, I hope I have honored him here today with a spirited defense of his movie. And I'd like to read the last bit of his book because I think it's relevant. He says, quote, one of the first reactions to this film was from an anonymous fan who wrote a long and thoughtful letter to a website that included many pros and cons before concluding with the line, this movie left me with a nice warm feeling inside. I wonder if she realizes how much that matters to the guy sitting in my chair. A comment like that, well, that's what makes all the sleepless nights worthwhile. That's why I became a writer. Well, Michael, if you're out there somewhere beyond the stars, just know that this movie made me feel nice and warm inside too. And I think many fans feel that way, and I hope the jury feels that way as well. May his memory be a blessing, and thank you.
Thank you both. Members of the jury, Mr. Robb Maynard, Mr. Big Ben Haslar, and Mr. I Never Kissed You with a Beard Before, Ryan Luis Rodriguez. You have all heard the facts concerning this case. It is now up to you to determine if this film is guilty of being a bad movie. The bailiff will escort you to the deliberation room to render your verdict. I kissed him and he said, yuck, ungrateful bastard.
Whenever we can make jokes about kissing Ryan.
We do as often as possible.
Okay, guys, what are we thinking? Rob?
I'd like to hear first from you, Ryan, because I think you probably have the least Trek experience.
I've seen all of the movies.
Okay,
And
that's more
I've
than
seen
me.
I've seen all of the original series.
I
And I've
have to.
seen a few seasons of Next Generation. I think I've seen the first season of Voyager.
We're
seen
then actually I
pilot
think
of Deep
you
Space
outrank
Nine.
me a little bit because I'm basically original series and that's it.
Yeah, I'm curious into it, but never to the point of like,
Not like these guys.
diving headfirst. No, not at
we
all.
had
Like I'm lost.
We had very knowledgeable people.
I am absolutely lost in this discussion.
But what I'd like to ask you is
don't
what's
like
the
the first
responsibility
phase
of a film like this that follows up on a series to be able to stand on its own, or should it lean on the series that it precedes it?
See, that's interesting. I don't think that it needs to stand on its own. I think that this movie exists because people want to spend time with these characters. And it doesn't necessarily matter what the movie is, that they get to go to the movie theater and get to basically visit with family that they don't often get to talk to.
And you don't want to reset, like start everything again and explain who all these characters are and all their relationships with each other.
And I mean,
you have that shortcut already.
It has the brand, so even if people don't necessarily understand the nuances of it, they're going to go see it anyway.
Yeah.
So
but
I
it
think
has that gatekeeping aspect of where if you don't know these things, I think you miss out on a lot, right? Like I don't know enough about Riker and Troy to understand that their relationship previously was kind of standoffish or
it was on again, off again sort of
okay,
thing.
So whatever.
I had no idea. I figured that's what they were like on the show because again,
Yeah.
I've only seen the first 2 seasons, but this was the only original Trek movie that I ever saw in the theaters. So, and that was before I'd ever seen the original series, before I'd seen anything. And what I knew about it then was like, it's okay. It's fine. It's pleasant. It's inoffensive. It's kind of like a warm bath. And, I mean, I guess yeah, exactly. Getting shaved in that bath. And, but like in watching it now, and I remember revisiting it and thinking like, it's not so good. And watching it this time and being like, I have no problems with that really whatsoever. Like the only real issue that I had was I miss model spaceships. Because this is the first movie that they did.
CGI was bad.
CGI spaceships.
The space looked good, but the ships themselves looked terrible.
I miss the tactile kind of like practical nature of that stuff. But other than that, I was fine with it. I mean, I'm not going to write home about it because I am at home.
Yeah.
But, hello, Mata. Hello, Fada.
That's what I like about the original series Blu-rays is you can either turn on the CGI ships or keep the original planets.
And I always keep the originals, baby.
Yeah, exactly. That's what I'm there for. I like the practical effects of the era. So the story, I really think that the prosecution nailed that home to me. It was really contrived because it's basically supposed to be kind of like a metaphor, right? For similar conflicts of relocation. Well, I think I've read some things that it's supposed to really draw parallels to the Serbian Bosnian conflict.
Well, that and just life in Los Angeles where everybody's trying to remain young.
Yeah, well, there might be that.
Sure.
I mean, I thought I saw a lot of parallels to Israeli Palestine too. But I don't know if that was as intentional. But I think I do think, to the defense point, I don't think it's as black and white because the good guys, like the Baku, they also kicked all the Sona out.
No, I think the Sona left.
I thought they got exiled.
No, they were exiled. They were exiled. Yeah.
Oh, you're right.
Yeah, so that wasn't particularly nice. He could have if they want technology, then they should have had to go start a colony on the other side of the planet.
It's a big planet. You can go take technology on the other side.
To the prosecution's point, I found the plot really hard to follow. The film explains it, but it's mostly people talking in conversation, explaining it to you. They tell rather than show. And so even at the end, I was a little confused because yes, there might be a line of dialogue where this was explained, but it was a line of dialogue and it kind of
and they can cram those lines of dialogue into a minute with Dougherty and Picard, where it's well, why can't we just do this then? If we have this planet that rejuvenates people, and they in 1 minute, here's every reason why we can't do that. It will destroy the rings. These Baku or these Sona will die. There, we covered all our plot holes.
Yeah. Ben, let's hear some more from you. You're the biggest Trekkie here in the jury.
when I saw this film, I liked it for the first time, but I was a Trekkie. So, I liked all the characters and I was just ready to see more. And then as time went on, I had heard people drag on it a bit about how, if you have this sort of miracle cure-all, why are both sides like behaving the way they are? You kind of got the Sona needing to, they're going to die if you don't act immediately. But okay, assuming like you can sidestep that and develop the technology on your own, I don't know why you wouldn't. I don't know why the Baku like, oh, we got our finger on it, we claim dibs. you can't touch this planet. And then that 1 minute scene where they just sort of cram in all those explanations. It's like, okay, yeah, that tracks. you have to work it through in your head. But other than that, I have fun with it. I like Star Trek. I like The Next Generation. It's not the best example of it. It is sort of an extended episode. But it looks great with minus the CGI ships, and Picard and all the crew, like they're acting very well. They're very at home in their roles here. Like, there's no moment where you're kind of doubting that a person might behave in the way they are, because they know these roles.
All right. It's tough. I'm really kind of on the fence, because for me, Star Trek, it should be fun and light, which this I had a lot of moments of compared to Nemesis, but there also should be some kind of moment of action, and there really is no moment of action. I mean, Picard and F. Murray Abraham kind of stumbling around the collector ship, struggling to catch their breath. It's not thrilling.
They're shooting like the droids that are like tagging them to beam them out and stuff.
Those are kind of fun. Some of the racy planets. I think the plus is that it does have, I think, these important parallels, and it is super contrived. But I think it's to try to set up that kind of metaphor that they're trying to go for. I know that's not exactly the word I'm thinking of. So, but you know what I mean. They're trying to make real world parallels. So it's definitely not great, but I think I could let it squeak by as not guilty. Just because I thought the message was, if not ham-fistedly done, but an important one.
Ben?
I do appreciate the prosecution's points. They're not wrong, but to get it all the way to bad, it doesn't do that for me. But of course, I'm a Trek fan, so I'm already halfway in. You have to do a lot to convince me that it's bad. So I don't see that burden of proof has been quite met.
Okay, well, because I don't want this to be unanimous, and because I think the prosecution raised some damn good points that I never thought of, because again, I sat there the entire time going, yeah, that happened.
What point was the strongest, you think?
The points.
That you can't sight read Gilbert and Sullivan. When he when he puts that on the screen and Worf starts singing Gilbert and Sullivan perfectly, it's like, you can't just karaoke Gilbert and Sullivan. Its lines are all over the place. It's really hard to sing.
Okay, that scene is so
it's got the bouncing dot.
Yeah. Follow the bouncing bull.
Let's go tell that very handsome judge.
He is, isn't he? Mr. Foreman, have you reached a verdict?
We have, Your Honor. In the case of the People versus Star Trek Insurrection, we find the defendant not guilty of being a bad movie.
Thank you, Foreman. The verdict is so rendered. So back off, okay? It's all right. Leave us alone. We like our Star Trek. I'm sorry. I just had to get that out. Court is adjourned.
This is Bill Shatner, fresh from space with my best friend, Jeff Bezos. Josh Weilerstein. This verdict didn't go in your favor. Set your faces to stun. What did you think of the jury's verdict?
I'm very disappointed. Obviously, I think I love Star Trek. I just really didn't enjoy watching this movie. I was disappointed like the whole time watching this movie. But I understand, and I think Dylan made some really great points that the movie maybe wasn't as black and white as I thought it was. So I'm disappointed, but I'll give it another shot. I'll if it comes on sometime, I won't pass it over immediately.
I think what it needed was a Captain Kirk cameo. What do you think? Dylan J. Schlender.
Isn't he dead?
Definitely.
Oh.
He's
Dylan
dead,
J. Schlender,
right?
I'm perfectly alive. I'm right here.
Kirk died in Generations.
Yeah.
We can bring him back. Shoot him into some sort of sun. Dylan J. Schlender, what did you think of the jury's verdict?
I'm actually very moved. When we started Reels of Justice a couple years ago, this movie was pretty much right on the top of my list because I was so 50-50 on it, and I wanted it to have a day in court, and I was ready to prosecute it, and I was ready to defend it. And when Josh told me he actually wanted to do this movie, I was ecstatic. I couldn't believe it. I'm like, oh, finally we get to do it. I finally get to prosecute it. And then he said he wanted to prosecute it, so I had to shift my paradigm. But I gotta say, and I gotta thank you, Josh, because you brought up all the right points. I mean, I probably would have brought pretty much the same case in your position. And this process actually has, and reading Michael Pillar's book, actually, I do actually really like this Star Trek movie now. I have changed my opinion on it because of this show, and that's a magical thing. So I want to thank everyone here because it feels great to do that. It really does. So thank you, everyone, and thank you, Josh.
You're welcome.
That is very beautiful and moving. Let's get back. Wait, what's that? It's a Romulan attack! Let's get back to the studio for post-trial analysis.
I'm surprised we didn't do that bit sooner.
Because we're on a
Gosh,
that
great.
makes no sense on radio.
It makes
where
no
everyone's
sense on
listening.
audio only. But
Josh, great case though. Great. I was
thanks.
so happy you wanted to do this movie. And like I said, I was so ready to prosecute it. And you're like, I want to prosecute it. I'm like, I am so ready to defend it.
So I'll make a confession now, which is I can't believe this. I had no idea it was a sequel. I just came in there watching this movie, and maybe that's why I thought it was so kind of like blunt axe heavy-handed. Was because I just didn't. I never saw First Contact.
Oh, it's great.
And so I was watching this movie like, what the fuck is going on? Like, why are they acting like this? So maybe that certainly could be why I felt very strong. I was texting a friend of mine who is a big Star Trek fan. I was like, dude, this movie sucks. And he was like, yeah, it kind of does, but there's this thing that's nice. And
it didn't suck enough.
It didn't suck enough. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. It took over 20 years for it to grow on me. I used to really rail against this movie quite a bit.
Well, I think what you said about what the writer wrote, Michael Pillar, you said, right?
Mm-hmm.
What he wrote makes a lot of sense to me because I love the Star Trek episodes that make you very thoughtful at the end. Yeah. And you're like, like that was a really interesting thing that happened, and the Inner Light I think is like the best example of that.
Oh, and those episodes you brought up are way better than Insurrection too. I mean, you're not wrong.
Oh yeah.
Sure. But I think what he wrote, I mean, in that case, he did exactly what he wanted to do because it is sort of just like a warm and fuzzy movie.
Yes.
Exactly. So I think that's really interesting to know what he was intending to do with it.
I'll send you a copy of the book. It's a short read. It's really good. It's really good.
It, yeah.
We love it. So Josh, what have you been up to lately? What has been keeping you busy?
I've been just conducting a lot. I was in Kansas City in the beginning of January, and then in December I was in Liverpool and in where else? Back in the U.S. again. I was supposed to do a concert in Boston just a couple of weeks ago, but it was canceled due to the Omicron outbreak. But in February and March, I'll be in Birmingham in the UK, and then I'll be in Seattle and Boston and Indianapolis and North Carolina. So I'll be doing a ton of traveling, hopefully with COVID receding. And so I'll be doing a lot of conducting.
And for people who don't know, you conduct orchestras.
Oh, yeah, I should say that.
Yeah,
I do.
Yeah, and it's like,
I've
been on the train.
Right. I am a train
conductor.
conductor.
It's a hell of a one to go from England to Tennessee.
It's a long train ride.
Choo-choo.
Taking a train from Seattle all the way to Boston. No, I'm an orchestral conductor, and I'll be traveling to conduct City of Birmingham Symphony Orchestra, Seattle Symphony, North Carolina Symphony, Indianapolis Symphony, and the Phoenix Orchestra, which is based in Boston. Phoenix,
is there a difference between an orchestra and a symphony?
Not really. It just depends on what that orchestra or symphony orchestra. Most of them are actually
one pays
the
more
orchestra
than
I'm
the
going
other.
to in Birmingham is the City of Birmingham Symphony Orchestra. So you get double there.
Awesome.
Oh, nice.
And you have a fantastic podcast.
Yeah, I have a classical music podcast called Sticky Notes. That's how I met Dylan. And it comes out with an episode every week, and usually about a specific piece of usually very famous classical music repertoire, like a Beethoven symphony, but sometimes I try to do more rare and unheard things. So even if you're a beginner
Like
and
the
never
Star Trek Insurrection soundtrack.
like the soundtrack, Star Trek, I did have a film music episode.
That's a good one too. It's very good.
So it's for anybody from beginners, if you haven't heard a note of classical music, all the way to if you are a musician like me. I think it's something there's something there for everybody.
Oh yeah, I learned something every time I listen to your show. Like when I listened to the one about the Dvorak's New World Symphony, I was explaining it in casual conversation, and they thought I was so smart. But I gave them the link to your show. I'm like, no, this is why I know so much.
You just copied and pasted that stuff.
And also, I wanted to talk to you real quick. Because I sent you emails for ideas all the time, and I know you can't officially say I give you your best ideas because that's not fair to your other fans. But your Sibelius's 5th episode was fantastic, and I have 2 things I want to bring up. I agree with you on one thing. I like the faster tempo at the end. I disagree with you. I like the cheesy ending of bump, bump.
Oh, but the silences.
Yes, with the silences. I like the silence. Yeah,
I do too. I just think it's really, it's very similar to this movie, that the ending with all of with no silences that just keeps going. Yeah. It's very warm and fuzzy and just sort of makes you feel good. But the ending with the silences is weird and thoughtful, and you're like, what the hell like just happened? Though there's a thing that I didn't include in that episode about that ending, which is supposedly, I don't know if this is true, in the hall that it was premiered in, that ending with the silences, was a very resonant hall. And the hall, the echo, you would hear the Swan theme, bum beam bum bum bum, in the overtones from the chords. So I don't know if that's cool. I don't know if that's true. That's what some Finnish musician told me. So hopefully they weren't, just having me on. But
that's why they didn't finish.
Oh, boo.
I love it, Ben. Thank you. Someone, I was holding it back. There was something brewing up here.
But that's part of I totally think the ending with the silences is better, and he made the right decision. It's just very interesting to hear what he originally came up with.
No, it was great. I mean, I really think everyone should listen to your show. I convince more people to listen to your show than to my show. So
thank you so much.
That's the truth. I know.
So
I'm glad you're on this show because I'm going to be able to piggyback off it now.
Josh, we always ask for a recommendation from our guests for a movie that you think people should see. So, what is a movie people should check out?
Wow. So this
could be another Star Trek movie if you want.
The movie actually that I originally proposed to Dylan to do on this show was My Octopus Teacher, which is a recent movie that I think was out just on Netflix. Came out during the sort of the height of the pandemic. It's a documentary about a man's relationship with a wild octopus, and it is like beyond amazing. It's one of the most moving movies I've ever seen in my life.
Platonic relationship, though, right?
Yes.
Yes.
It's a platonic, but it's a love relation. It's an asexual love relationship with this octopus, and it's a remarkable movie. You'll never be able to look at an octopus the same way again because of the incredible, just mind-blowing abilities and intelligence and empathetic abilities of these animals.
They're wicked smart.
Yeah, exactly. It is just an incredible movie, and I highly recommend it.
I have I had some friends who tried to get us to eat cuttlefish, and one of my friends absolutely refused because he said they're too intelligent.
Yeah.
I ate it. Tastes like tuna. So,
or tastes like dolphin, right?
Oh, I don't know. Are octopus smarter than dolphin? Have they decided yet?
I think they are. Yeah,
I think really octopus smart. Are. Yeah, they're
octopi, or I think it is octopuses, right?
It's octopuses. There's
just some debate.
Yeah, I think it goes in the animal kingdom. Primates, dolphins, pigs, octopuses, dogs. So
I love
dogs. Cats are smarter than dogs. Come on.
Mice are the top ones.
Anyway, animals are wicked smart, and we should check out the octopus one. Dylan, you were the opposing counsel, so what is your recommendation?
Oh, well, thank you. So I love Star Trek, I love sci-fi, and so does everyone in my family. All the Schlenders are big sci-fi nuts, and so I'm recommending a movie I watched with my godfather, my Uncle Gary, 2001's Imposter, starring Gary Sinise as a government specialist who is accused of being
An imposter?
A robot.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. Well, yes, actually, and a robot. An alien android assassin on a mission to kill prominent officials. Action ensues as he sets out to clear his name. It's like The Fugitive, only with robots and more explosions.
Oh, very cool. No, and you can't go wrong with Gary Sinise, right?
Gary Sinise is just tip top, and Tony Shalhoub's in it. It's actually a pretty decent cast.
Isn't Vincent D'Onofrio in that?
Vince D'Onofrio's in it as well. Yeah.
There you go.
Yeah, it's a solid movie based on a short story by Philip K. Dick.
Oh, well, that's the straight dick. Big Ben, what is your recommendation?
My recommendation only loosely connects to Star Trek: The Next Generation. Brandon Brago and Patrick Stewart both did work on it, and it is technically a show, but if Ryan can do it, so can I. I'm recommending Cosmos with Neil deGrasse Tyson, back before he may or may not have given Dylan a deGrasse kicking in the case of The People versus Porky's 2.
We'll never release
Cosmos,
it.
Never released.
No. Cosmos
Patreon,
is more than
Patreon.
just a beautiful high definition show to test out your new TV. It delves into the wonders of the universe, from the infinitesimally small to the incomprehensibly large aspects of our universe, and it's well worth taking a look at just to ponder how tiny of a cog we are in this grand spectrum of the universe.
I second that recommendation. Cosmos is amazing.
And I think it's
It
on
is.
Hulu. I think
It's on Disney Plus.
Disney Plus. Okay,
for sure.
Yeah,
Yeah.
It
Disney
is
Plus.
Fox. So
We are down with NDT.
All right. Okay.
Neil deGrasse Tyson.
It works.
that's a thinker.
Yeah.
So Maynard, you were also on the show. What are you recommending?
wow, you're gonna skip Ryan like that? Okay,
I thought we'd
I'll
go to
save
you for
Ryan
then.
for last. Then.
Best for last. Best for last.
I'm recommending 2009's Moon, a
Oh,
science
that's good.
a science fictional feature and the directorial debut of Duncan Jones. It stars Sam Rockwell, and that's basically it. But it also does feature the voice of Kevin Spacey. But that unpleasantness aside, this really is a Spacey picture in more ways than one. I don't want to give away too much because that kind of ruins the fun of it. But what I will tell you is it takes place on the moon.
There it is.
Sam Rockwell gets a lot of screen time, and it explores the moral implications of scientific advancement as we progress ever forward in our relentless quest to achieve dominion over the stars.
Or at least the moon.
Well, that's just step one. Also, side note.
No,
Yeah, please
go ahead. Sorry, Rob. Go ahead.
Well, side note, the resource that we're mining on the moon is called helium-3, which is actually a real isotope discovered back in 1939. So just in case anyone asks, you can tell them sequels have been around forever.
This time it's lighter.
Yeah. Moon is currently streaming on Hulu.
You were going to say, Josh?
No, I was just going to add that if you ever have me on the show again, I'd be happy to talk about The Martian, another movie that everybody loved that I really hated. So,
I almost recommended it. I was this close to recommending it. But yes,
and I like sci-fi movies, but that movie, I watched it on a plane, and I was not.
Well,
I
a
was
plane's not the best place to watch a movie.
I was not pleased by that movie.
No, but you've got a deal. We will have you back. We'll get you on the calendar immediately. Have you come back and prosecute The Martian, because I'd
That'd
really
be
like
fun.
to hear that case.
Okay.
That would be fascinating. Ryan, send us on home the best way possible.
My recommendation this week has nothing to do with Insurrections or Star Trek. It's the post-apocalyptic drama The World, the Flesh, and the Devil from 1959. Harry Belafonte stars as the last remaining human on Earth following an atomic cataclysm, only he's not alone.
Ooh.
Shot in gorgeous black and white cinemascope on the empty streets of New York, it recalls and surpasses later films like The Last Man on Earth and The Omega Man. Yes, it's better than The Omega Man. If you like either, you'll probably enjoy this. The World, the Flesh, and the Devil is currently streaming on HBO Max and the Criterion Channel.
Every time there's one of those Last Man on Earth movies, he's never the last man on Earth.
You know, I have some CinemaScope trivia. Lady and the Tramp is the first animated movie shot in CinemaScope.
That is true.
That is trivia. That is
Yeah, that's all I got.
And with that, that's all the time
That's
we
all
have.
we
Really, with that?
We're all out of show.
Clearly,
But we
scraping
want to
above
thank
the
our
barrel.
guest Joshua Weilerstein for joining us. Thank you so much, Josh.
Thank you for having me. It's always such a pleasure.
Yep, we'll have you back for The Martian.
Okay, sounds
and
good.
we hope everyone will tune in for that as well, as the reels of justice keep turning.
Count it.
CinemaScope.
Space
Make it
flute.
so.
I like make it so. I think that was a good one.
Make it so.
Well, have him say it again then.
Make it
No,
so.
I think I'm going to stop recording right about.
Please follow us on Twitter at Reels of Justice, Instagram Reels of Justice, and Facebook.com/Reels of Justice.